Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Comedy Corner. Wait, no. What's up, guys? This is Sean Patrick Urshan coming at you with another tag video. This is the top 10 comedians of all time tag, and this was created by Jen and Christian over at Jen's Reviews from the Grave, and they tagged me in it. So thanks so much for tagging me, guys. And this is their first tag that they've created, so definitely, guys, show them some love. Go check out their video, check out their channel, like and subscribe to their channel because they're amazing YouTubers. And let's show them some love, shall we? Because I'm going to tag a bunch of people at the end of this, and I want all you guys to do it. So I'm going to start with some honorable mentions, but before I do that, I just want to say this is all stand-up comedians. Now, it can be people that went from stand-up comedian and transitioned over to movies and TV shows or became dramatic actors, but they had to get their start doing stand-up comedy. So let's get to the honorable mentions. So my first honorable mention is going to be Rowan Atkinson, the legendary British comedian who people might not know him as Rowan Atkinson as much, but they certainly know who Mr. Bean is. Such a legendary character, Mr. Bean. Everybody knows Mr. Bean. And he plays the part so brilliantly. He barely says a word, and he's just so funny and so hilarious. He's clumsy, he's weird, he's kind of wacky, but awesome comedian. And of course he did Blackadder back in the day, legendary TV show. He also did Johnny English, and he actually starred in a James Bond movie, believe it or not. Never Say Never Again, he played Felix Leiter. Little tidbit for you guys. But he did do stand-up comedy as well. He had an awesome television show on HBO, stand-up comedy special that was just great, just brilliant. Next honorable mention is going to be Jim Carrey. Of course, you got to put him in there somewhere. Yeah, legendary comedian, started with stand-up comedy. He also did a children's TV show way back when he first started. And of course, he transitioned over to television. He did In Living Color, and that's where he kind of took off and became a huge success. And, yeah, great stand-up comedian as well, very animated, very physical, and, did all kinds of wild impressions, and, always using his face almost like a rubber mask. That's probably why they picked him to do the Mask movie. But yeah, and then he became a big movie star and became, like, one of the highest paid people in Hollywood, I believe. And yeah, big hit movies like Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber and The Mask and The Grinch. He played The Grinch. Yeah, legend. Okay, let's get to the top 10, shall we? Number 10 is going to be Jerry Lewis. That's right, the legendary Jerry Lewis, who, yeah, he got his start doing stand-up way back in, like, the vaudeville days and stuff. And he was usually always paired with somebody, like a duet. One guy would play the straight, handsome guy, and he would be the goofy, clumsy, wacky dude, or nerdy, klutzy guy, And he ended up meeting Dean Martin, and Dean Martin took that role of the straight man, and he's the singer, and he's the ladies' man, handsome guy. And of course, Jerry Lewis was the geeky, nerdy, clumsy, oaf character, And no one could do that better than Jerry Lewis. He was the best in the world at that, I would say. He was so good at the physical comedy, and being a clumsy oaf and playing. Later on in his career, he did a lot of movies where he played, like, different characters and stuff, and, like, Nutty Professor and stuff like that. And he was also a huge influence on Eddie Murphy, who did that a lot in his movies, started playing a lot of different characters, So yeah, gotta give it up to Jerry Lewis. And of course, he became such a huge advocate for children's charity, the Jerry's Kids thing, and for muscular dystrophy and yeah, such a great guy and a legendary comedian, absolutely. Next up, number 9 is Steve Martin. Yes, certainly one of the most famous stand-up comedians of all time. Definitely one of the most successful, I would say. I mean, he sold out arenas left and right. He was huge when he was a stand-up comedian. And of course, his big selling comedy albums, just huge. And he also was very physical, like a Rowan Atkinson or a Jerry Lewis. But he did get into, like, the sex stuff and the more provocative things, Whereas, like, people like Jerry Lewis and Rowan Atkinson were kind of clean, But yeah, Steve Martin obviously became huge when he went to SNL and became the most popular host of SNL of all time. And then he transitioned into movies like The Jerk, that was a huge hit, and, Planes and Trains and Automobiles, that's an absolute classic. That's my favorite one. That movie is awesome. Yeah, big star in movies, big star in stand-up comedy, and he hosted the Oscars and stuff a couple times. Yeah, just a legend. So now I'm going to start showing my age, if I haven't already. Abbott and Costello, yes. I grew up as a kid watching all their movies, and I just laughed my ass off, and I just loved them. I loved Bud Abbott and Lou Costello, such a legendary comedy duo. And of course, they had such an amazing career. They started back in the burlesque comedy show days. They did radio for many, many years, And you can't picture one without the other. You can't have Bud Abbott. I wouldn't go to a comedy show to just see Bud Abbott. You gotta have Lou Costello, You gotta have both of them because together they are just magic, And of course they had their own TV show. And of course they had so many classic comedy movies, including my favorite horror comedy of all time, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. What an amazing movie that is. Yeah, just a legendary comic duo. Have so many classics like, Buck Privates, Pardon My Sarong, Meet the Mummy, Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff, Hold That Ghost, it goes on and on. Just amazing. I love them. Number 7 is going to be Johnny Carson. Yes, such a legendary comedian who started, doing the stand-up comedy, and then he did radio, and he ended up eventually getting his own show, The Johnny Carson Show, and obviously took over and started The Tonight Show, and was on that for, 30 years? It's crazy. And his monologues to me are just comic genius, just amazing stand-up comedy, so witty, just amazing one-liners. And I also liked when he did the skits on his show, where he did like Saturday Night Live type stuff, these comedy skits, where he played all these different characters and stuff, and he really showed his talent. Just an amazing comedian, very gifted, very intelligent. And an amazing host, amazing talk show host. Next up is going to be another host of The Tonight Show, Jay Leno, who was also a legendary stand-up comedian. For so many years and years and years, he was a stand-up comedian, and that's probably where he really got big, was showing up on The Tonight Show, having the gigs at The Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson had him back many, many times, And eventually he ended up, taking over The Tonight Show, and he was a host for many, many years. And I really enjoyed him as the host of The Tonight Show. I loved his monologues. I thought he was very witty, very charming, very charismatic, and just funny as hell, And he was definitely a more clean-cut comedian, like in the vein of, say, a Jerry Seinfeld, Johnny Carson, Yeah, he wasn't like one of the wilder comedians. But he didn't have to be, because he was smart and witty and intelligent, and he knew how to tell a good joke. Next up is going to be number 5, and that is Jerry Seinfeld. Certainly infamous stand-up comedian. Very, very, very popular. And, yeah, he's another guy that just you know, like Steve Martin sold out arenas left and right, you know, and got the big gigs on the Tonight Show and all that. David Letterman. And eventually he did the TV series Seinfeld, which is the biggest television show ever, you know. And I absolutely love Seinfeld. I have all the DVDs. I watch them all the time. It's my favorite. It's probably my favorite comedy of all time. To be honest with you, I think it's absolutely hilarious. I love it. I love every actor on that show, including Jerry Seinfeld. But obviously he wrote it along with Larry David. It's just a brilliant, brilliant sitcom. So yeah. Jerry Seinfeld in at number 5. Number 4 is going to be one that Jen had on her list, and that is the great Sam Kinison. Yes. Who was just like a rock star, you know. And that's what he was like. He wore the bandana, he had the long hair, he came out in the wild outfits and stuff. He was like the rock star of comedy. And like Jen said, yeah, he was a preacher that kind of lost his way, you know, and went crazy and just like snapped one day, I guess. And he used that to his advantage by becoming a wild, crazy comedian. And boy, was he falling, you know, because he is one of the foul-mouthed comedians that will go there when he wants to. He will go there with the sex stuff and the wild, crazy antics and drugs and talking about drugs and rock and roll and he was just wild and crazy and over the top. He didn't care, you know. And he was so good at it. So devastatingly funny. And intelligent as well. Very intelligent. And I liked when sometimes he would use the preacher voice when he did his stand-up routine. I love in one of the HBO comedies when he was talking about how people are the televangelist, all they care about is like raising money, and they use the word of God to make money. He was talking about Christians opening up a shopping mall. He was like, they'll shop with only Christians, God's mall, so they don't have to shop with the sinner and the unbeliever. I love that. And it was so funny. So next up is going to be, number 3 is George Carlin, of course. What a legendary comedian who just was in the business forever, it seems like, you know. And he started out back in the radio, you know, and he was very, very clean cut back in the day, I must say. He didn't curse or anything, just very witty and charismatic, you know. He had a very clean act, but something must have snapped in him at some point because he became very dirty and foul-mouthed over the years. And by the end, he was like the cranky old man, like the bad grandpa, basically, you know. But he was absolutely hilarious, incredibly intelligent, very witty, very charismatic, just amazing, amazing stand-up comedian. Just the one-liners, the zingers left and right. He could tell a story. That's probably his biggest gift. George Carlin was so great at telling a funny story, you know. And that's probably his greatest gift. Yeah, George Carlin is just a genius of comedy. Absolutely. Number 2 is going to be my man Rodney Dangerfield. He doesn't get any respect. No respect at all. I love that guy. And he's another guy that was just a legend that was at it for so many, many years, you know. And it took him a long time to finally, you know, get a good grasp and get a good following. But eventually he did, and he became huge and became like the biggest comedian in the world at one time, you know. And he ended up getting the big gigs like Tonight Show, Johnny Carson, David Letterman, and all that stuff. And he transitioned into movies as well. And he had a few really good ones like Easy Money and Caddyshack, of course, which is my favorite comedy ever. And he was brilliant in Caddyshack. And of course, Back to School. That was a classic, right? He himself would tell you, though, he wasn't huge into doing the movies. He just wanted to be a stand-up comedian, really. And he was incredible at it, you know, so gotta love Rodney Dangerfield. Rap Captain Rodney. Remember that song? He came out with the music video. It's just hilarious. I went to a dog show and I won. So funny. Number 1 is going to be Eddie Murphy. Yes. Such an amazing comedian. I just think he's the funniest comedian of all time. Not just his stand-up comedian, but his amazing legendary stint on SNL and all the great movies he made. Not so much these days, but, you know, early in his career he had a string of big hits in awesome movies like Beverly Hills Cop, 48 Hours, you know, Coming to America, which is my favorite, by the way. I love Coming to America. Let's give it up for Mr. Randy Watson. Sexual Chocolate. They play so fine, don't you agree? I love that movie. I absolutely love that movie. And that's one where he played, that was probably the first time he did a movie where he played a bunch of different characters. You know, he played the old man at the barbershop. He played Randy Watson, the, like, Elvis wannabe dude, you know. And he played Prince Akeem, of course, the lead role in the film, and he played a bunch of different characters in that movie, and it's hilarious. And of course, he was a genius of stand-up comedy. He went on world tours, and he made movies based on the stand-up comedy, like Raw and Delirious, which are two of the biggest stand-up comedy movies of all time, the most successful. And the most brilliant. I think my favorite routine was on Raw when he was talking about going to McDonald's. He kept begging his mother to, you know, I want McDonald's. When he was talking about himself as a little kid, begging his mom to get McDonald's. And he's like, no, we have burgers at home. That McDonald's is just crap. I'll make my own burgers. He's like, there's no onions on McDonald's. And then she makes these big giant mama burgers, you know, greasy ass, with the bun all melted and the bread all like soggy, and and he grabs it and he's like, that's not McDonald's. I love that. Yeah, Eddie Murphy's just an icon, brilliant actor, a brilliant comedian, and just a superstar, you know. Alright guys, that's my list, the top 10 comedians of all time. So this is the tag created by Jen and Christian from Jen's Reviews from the Grave. Again, check out their channel, like and subscribe to their videos, and do the tag, because I'm going to tag some people now. I'm going to tag Lest Venom 76. I'm going to tag Andrew Ballina. I'm going to tag Hellhound from Horror Metal. I'm going to tag Ross over at Random Horror. I'm going to tag Movie Review Time and Dave Maggot. So guys, answer the call and do the top 10 comedians of all time tag by Jen's Reviews from the Grave. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Urshan. Tune in and stay funny. Alright, see you guys.